Good evening. Welcome back to James Draws Everything, where today we are continuing in our episodic adventure with illustrating every country in the world's flag, no more than once per country. And today we are doing a glorious episode as we are going back into the continent of Europe and doing the United Kingdom of Great Britain, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And you have no doubt seen this flag. It is called the Union Jack. Okay, yeah, I can't do that accent this entire episode, guys. All right, so we're doing the United Kingdom. All right, we got a big one today, right? This is probably one of the most famous flags in the world, right? The Union Jack, immediately recognizable. The second you see it, you think of, I don't know, tea, that crazy voice I just did, drinking at a pub at 11 a.m., all the good stuff. Global empire. There's a ton of stuff to talk about today. And I can already hear you guys. I can see the comments. Somebody saying, well, James, you forgot to talk about... No. All right, listen. We've only got so much time to do this. There's obviously hours and hours and hours worth of content here. And I only got a few minutes, guys. All right, so... We're gonna do the greatest hits. We're gonna do the quick and dirty. I'm gonna try to talk about as much as I can, but I'm obviously probably gonna leave something out that's gonna make somebody angry. But hey, what can I say? I do this for free, guys. So cut me some slack here. And with these countries too, remember this is a United Kingdom, right? So Great Britain has their own story, right? Wales has their own story. Scotland has their own story, and these don't always connect with each other, right? They don't always intersect. All of these places have very rich ethnic identities on their own part, right? Kind of separate from the United Kingdom. So we could do entire episodes, on just Scotland, just Northern Ireland, just Wales, just Britain, but we're doing the UK proper today. So I'll try to be as detailed as I can. Again, we'll do the important stuff. So let me just see here. I just want to measure something. About three. All right. I guess I did do that right. My eyes were playing tricks with me there. I want to do the Union Jack justice because it's part of my heritage, right? If you're an American, right, we share a lot of DNA. So let's get down to it. So ancient times, pre-Celtic peoples lived there, right? And then the Romans arrive around 43 AD. And this is kind of where you start seeing early forms of Christianity arrive to the island. And everybody, they'll say that, especially today, like, oh, well, they raped and pillaged the world. They had so many advantages and this and that. And it's like, well, you're looking at things from a very narrow lens as far as like your timeline there, because the British people were basically barbarians, right? And I always encourage people to read this. Tacitus is that how he say it? I always forget. His Agricola and Germania, right? So it's a first-hand description of the early Roman arrivals, to the British island. They talk about, how barbaric these people were and how primitive they were, and how, they were not the people of Rome. So, yeah, history kind of goes all over the place. They were not always, number one. We'll get there though. They basically take over the entire world at one point. So, early Roman settlers, right? Early Christianity, Germanic peoples start showing up. The Germanic Anglo-Saxons. So that's where we get, like when you talk of like white people, now white people of British descent, we call them Anglo-Saxons, and that comes from those early Germanic, I guess is the correct way to say it, migrations to the island, right? And they kind of start, mixing with the people that are there and kind of create like a new culture, new race.
In about the 10th century, that's kind of when we see like a unified kingdom of England. And even the name England comes from Anglo. So the English people, the Anglo people. 9th century, you have a separate kingdom of Scotland formed, right? These people called the Picts from like the northern part. The Highlanders form like a separate kingdom of Scotland. And England and Scotland they're fighting each other. They're teaming up. They're fighting each other. They're like brothers. There's a lot of history intertwined there. And one of the early kings of England, who I think is one of the greatest men to study of all time, Alfred the Great, reigned 886 to 899 A.D. And there was a lot of Danish, right, Viking and Dane invasions in those times, because that was one of the more martial dominant classes in that region. And Alfred, being a great man, a great Christian, a great merciful man, he defeated the Vikings and retook what is now, I believe it was London. I don't think it was called that yet, but he spared them as long as spared their king as long as he converted to Christianity. Right now, this is a very, very new kind of phenomenon here. Right, so basically, if you defeated an enemy before, you just vanquished them. You raped and pillaged. You took their women. So this was kind of set into the Anglo-Saxon DNA very early on. So, you always hear about the evil colonizers and this and that. Well, the only reason a lot of you are still here, you conquered peoples, is because of that tradition that was started by people like Alfred the Great. So, anyways, 1066, the Norman conquest, right? So only the second time in history the island is invaded, right? You can kind of count like the Germans in World War II, but that's not really like a full-blown invasion, more of just like a, kind of aerial bombardment. But, so this is kind of the beginning of the French and the English having some beef. Having some beef that needs to be settled behind the bar. And they start, mixing with the people that are there as well, creating some more, new cultures. So they get into England, Ireland, Wales. They couldn't get Scotland, right? So 1320, the Declaration of Arbroath creates basically an independent Scotland. And so that's kind of where you get more conflicts with the British or the English. I got to be careful with my words here. I know they're kind of used interchangeably nowadays. But, so the Scots kind of team up with the French, right? They're their homeboys for a while there. And, the English are kind of against the French. So the Scots kind of see the French as like natural allies, so that does cause some issues, right, throughout history, because the Scots are, they're kind of looking for somebody to be on their side during a lot of that time. 1215, the Magna Carta is written, so no government is above the law, and this is a very historic document, right? So basically, all of your kind of Western legal tradition comes from the Magna Carta, right? So it greatly influences like the United States Constitution and the United States politics. So, excuse me. So that's a very important moment in British history. Okay, let me just. I always get a little tripped up on this one here, so I just want to make sure I'm doing this right, because yes, these are not. It's not perfectly symmetrical, this Union Jack here. So there we go. Get our fatter sides over here. Pull that line up to there. All right. Okay, so then, after the Magna Carta, you kind of see a lot more conflict with the French during the next several centuries, right? So you got the 100 Years' War, which is, France and Scotland kind of teaming up against the Brits. After the Reformation happens, right? So the Reformation is a very important event in human history. That's kind of over in what is now Germany. Martin Luther puts up his thesis, right? Kind of rebelling against the church. So that's kind of where Protestantism comes from, right? So after the Reformation, you get an early form of Protestantism in the United Kingdom, right? So this is where good old Henry VIII comes in, right? So Henry VIII, there was a kind of a big kerfluffle about his marriage, right? And he wanted his marriage annulled for various reasons. We won't fully get into Henry VIII here. That's a whole nother topic. But he the Catholic Church wouldn't let it happen. So he's like, all right, screw you guys. I'm gonna have my own church. So that's where kind of like the Protestant Church of England comes from, which still exists to this day. Right, so they separate from the Catholic Church. They're no longer under the rule of Rome and the Vatican. And that does cause some issues because, of course, you still have Catholics there, especially in Ireland. So a lot of conflict between the Protestants and the Catholics over the next several hundred years, actually. I mean, that goes, as far as Ireland's case, that goes right up into modern times. 1603, James VI of Scotland, no relation to me, unites England and Ireland into another United Kingdom there, another treaty. And that's also around the same time that Britain starts expanding into the New World, right? So you have British influence popping up in America. And that could have never happened. That's kind of one of these great sort of butterfly effect, kind of what if sort of things in history where Britain, never really a major European power, right? It was always Spain that was the big European power. But Britain is always about that navy, right? Every British conflict is navy, because they're an island, right? They don't really have much else. Nobody, except for just basically twice in recorded history where they invaded, like a full-blown invasion. So they had a very strong navy. They defeated the Spanish, and that pretty much unseated the Spanish as the dominant power in the world, right? So Britain, as Spain gradually declines, they start showing up in the New World, and that's kind of where you get the early American colonies from, right? So you get the early Jamestown colony, also not named after me, but there's some debate about that. So early Jamestown, which eventually becomes the colonies that turn into the United States, that is formed. And Britain is also they're establishing a presence in like the Caribbean, so they're going into the Caribbean Sea as well. A lot of colonies there. And then hold on, let me just make sure we're doing this one right. Yeah, this flag always gets me. Okay, that works. Yep, and then we know what happens after that, right? So when King George of Britain ascends to the throne, keep in mind that Britain, the United Kingdom, they had been involved in many wars by that point that really kind of drained the bank there. So they start heavily taxing their colonies to pay their debts. And no taxation without representation and all of that. We know what happens after there. If you're a student of any kind of history, right? You know the United States Revolution. So that happens. They lose their colonies in the United States. But before that, so kind of before like a century or so before that, they have a civil war, or the leading century into that. They have a civil war. They have a monarchy that's restored under the Glorious Revolution of 1688. So that's kind of where you see a lot more like anti-Catholicism, right? So they kind of become much more, not like the French, like fully like secular, but much more like scientific, right? This is kind of during the age of the Industrial Revolution, so they're really just expelling like those Roman Catholic influences from the kingdom. So yeah, again, 1707. That's when you have the Union of England and Scotland. After they lose the colonies in the Americas, they start to pivot towards Asia, right? So this is kind of where you see the British East India Company begin, right? So the British take India as a colony. They're expanding into Africa, right? It's said at one point you could basically walk from Iraq, modern Iraq, all the way to Cape Town, South Africa, and never leave British soil because they basically conquered the entire thing. And then, of course, in Asia as well, they have Hong Kong, right? So Hong Kong is kind of like Britain 101 there, right? Because always about that navy. Hong Kong was like a major, kind of a trading post to open up those Asian markets, and Hong Kong remained with the United Kingdom until was it 1997? So that was kind of the last dance for the British Empire, as well as the Portuguese, right? Because they had Macau in China. So they're giving up like right around the same time. So both of those great European empires kind of sing their last song at the same time there. And then also, after the American Independence War, 1801 is when they unite with Ireland, and there's a few more European wars that they get involved with, mainly with the French, right? So the French play a big part in Britain's history because they're kind of one of the catalysts that kick off the American Revolution, right? The French and Indian War was one of those wars that really racked up British debts, and then even French and British politics, kind of influenced the way the Western world was built and put together. So the French Revolution, right, kind of like the Bolshevik Revolution 100 years later, casts a pretty heavy shadow over Europe, right? So Napoleon is basically at war with the entire European world, no different with Britain. This actually kind of leads to abolition as well. So Britain, with their colonies, of course, they're using slave labor, but they do abolish slavery as a result of the French Revolution, right? Because they feared what a workers' revolt would do to their own country, right? And this is also you have to talk about industrialization, right? At this point, so industrialization is changing the world, right? People's instead of living like hand to mouth, you grow your own food, you do this, you do that. Your work is basically just for you and your family for the most part, for a lot of people. That entire civilizational order is kind of uprooted overnight. So this is where you get a lot of radical politics from, right? Because it was just, critics of like the Industrial Revolution, and I'm no Marxist, but guys, your early like socialists and stuff, they always talked about that, right? How this was something that the world maybe wasn't ready for, or but then they get into all sorts of nonsense with economics and whatever. But they were just like, as far as maybe not their remedies, but the description was right. So it does completely overturn the existing society. And Britain, this is where you really start seeing them urbanize, right? So you get a lot of people that start moving into the cities. London becomes, like basically one of the capitals of the world as far as finance and textiles and all that stuff. So a little bit of a side topic there, but it is important because Britain's history is the world's history, right? Because again, in the colonial period, like leading into the 20th century, they're basically in half the planet, right? So they start when James Cook, also no relation to me, when he another great James lands in the South, not South Pacific, but like Pacific Indian Ocean, where that intersects in what is now Australia. He also ends up in New Zealand. They start a penal colony there, right? So they start sending their prisoners to Australia. And then they're also in Canada, right? So you had a lot of leftover Tories and Loyalists that stayed in Canada after the American Revolution. Canada gains independence after World War I, but still keeps friendly ties with the crown, with the home country. So before that as well, like that's where the Pax Britannia is made. So that's kind of like a British declaration to the world, that they're gonna basically run things, right? So the spirit of mercantilism and all that. Splendid isolation, in the 19th century as well. So not exactly the Monroe Doctrine, like of the United States, but they're stating that, Great Britain will no longer form permanent alliances, right? So Europe is, especially with all these radical political ideas that are coming to the forefront, causing a lot more wars. And Britain, not being on the mainland of Europe, says no, we're not gonna get involved with that. Like they do get involved with some wars, right? They're in Crimea, they're in some other places, the Greeks in the Greco-Turkish War, but they don't form permanent alliances, and that's kind of important because now we're getting into the 20th century, right? We're getting into World War I, and Britain does get involved in World War I because, Belgium is invaded by the Germans. So this leads to a massive amount of casualties, right? Britain fights on the Allied side, but it's kind of where things start falling apart a little bit for the empire. So again, Ireland achieves home rule at this point, becomes a Republic of Ireland. Canada not as hot of an issue, but Canada does separate as well. So some early cracks in the armor of the empire, and then India is making noise as well for their own home rule. World War II though is like that's the big one, right? So we talk about splendid isolation. Winston Churchill through Neville Chamberlain, right? But they both actually kind of act together on this. They give Poland a war guarantee, right? That if Poland is invaded by the Germans in World War II, that Britain will step in and interfere. Okay, fair enough, but problem with that, and this is talked about in a lot of what people call revisionist histories, what I like to call corrective histories. Britain couldn't deliver on that guarantee. So there was really no sense making a guarantee like that because it was none of their business in the first place. And that entire region of Danzig that was eventually invaded was basically German anyway, right? There wasn't like an independent like Polish state like we think of it now. Germany had to lose a lot of territory punitively as a result of the Treaty of Versailles after World War I, and just basically how warfare was now treated basically like comic books, right? Like good guys versus bad guys, as opposed to how it used to be in Europe. So that happens. World War II pops off. Of course, Britain, a big player in that. And this is really where they start losing their empire. So, they have a Lend-Lease Act, with the United States, where the United States is basically arming Great Britain, right, and giving them ships and whatnot. But it's at a heavy cost to the British Empire, right? So they actually don't even pay off their debt for Lend-Lease until like 2006. So yeah, that's like within living memory for a lot of people. So they kind of go bankrupt after World War II, right? And Poland, falls in the hands of the communists anyway. So much for free Poland. They lose their empire, right? Because they're in a massive debt. The United States basically becomes the world power after that, right? Britain's they hang on, right? They still have a seat at the table, but they get a lot of labor, like socialist governments at this point. The Clement Attlee kind of years there were very rough on the British economy, on the British people, but a lot of those programs were not just under the Attlee government. That was Churchill as well. So not really the hero that he's played out to be. Kind of a buffoon, in my opinion. Was never really taken seriously politically. Like he just kind of changed his mind with the wind, and just he played with like toy soldiers and stuff. And when he was thinking about war, and just always kind of talked like things were like a movie, right? Like he had a gift for the oratory, right? Like he was a very gifted speaker, but as like an actual serious man or a leader, I don't think so. He's one that needs more not revisionism, but corrective history. So yeah, there's a lot there, right? And then kind of into the modern times, you have their economy rebound a little bit. Now, kind of like with all like the globalism stuff, like the Brexit movement becomes popular. So they vote to leave the European Union. So one of those international community kind of deals in 2020. Also a lot of issues with like migration into Europe. Britain being no different, right? So like the most popular name in London now is Mohammed, right? So yeah, let's finish this off, right? And they'll say too, like, I'm just as British as you. It's like, no, you're not. No, it's a unique country with a unique history, and they just seem to be committing suicide right now as far as their culture. The prime ministers and politicians just seem to absolutely despise their own people. Like when you hear the way they talk about their farmers and all that. So we'll see what happens with them. I think on the South Africa scale, from 1 to 10, United States might be at like a 4 or a 5, but Great Britain is at like a 7 or an 8 right now. So that's not good. But yeah, respect your culture, respect your history, right? Respect great men for their pros and cons. Men like Alfred the Great, even guys like Henry VIII or Cromwell or King James, right? There's so much rich history there, and to kind of just throw that out and say that it's evil and this and that, and the empire was horrible. A lot of those places that were conquered never would have had industry, right, without Britain. So they would still die of toothaches, instead of getting modern medical care. And again, they're still alive because of like traditions of, kind of like what Alfred the Great did, right? You don't just vanquish your enemies when they're conquered. So that's the rich, lush history of the United Kingdom of Great Britain, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. So there's a ton there. We could talk for hours and hours and hours about this one, but we'll cut it off right here. I don't got hours and hours, but if you got a few minutes, not a few hours, you can leave a comment. If you got a few minutes, you can also like. And if you got a couple seconds, you could also subscribe. So with that in mind, I will catch you on the next video. Whoa. Hold on a minute, guys. I almost forgot. What is this flag about? All right. So you have two crosses here, right? It's a blue field with the red cross of St. George, edged in white, superimposed on the diagonal red cross of St. Patrick, the patron saint of Ireland. And that is superimposed on the diagonal white cross of St. Andrew, who is the saint of Scotland. So that is the Union flag, also called the Union Jack, representing the union of these great kingdoms. And the colors, especially the blue, have been the basis for a number of other flags in Commonwealth countries and their overseas territories. So I almost forgot there, but I caught myself, guys. So again, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next video.